I tell you his predictions are brilliant, brilliant. I mean, he would look at a chart and say, you know, right now your wife is learning a classical musical instrument from her teacher.
Mhm.
And the man looked at his watch and said, yes, this is the time the teacher comes to my home. And then he said, in 2 months, your wife will run away with this teacher. So the man says, will she come back? He says, this is my card. When she runs away, you come and you tell me. Now, this was the legend called Casey Saxena.
Yeah.
Click on the subscribe button, especially the bell on the right side. Otherwise, you will miss the latest videos.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome once again Gary Gomes. Gary Gomes ji, welcome to Saptarishis.
Thank you very much, Sunil.
Today he is going to be talking about one of those rare techniques in astrology that most astrologers in India have ignored. This is Yogi, Avyogi, duplicate Yogi planets. And it's been my favorite in 15 years. You know, his book, the book that launched this was of the late Sheshadri Iyer. I think it was 1952 published or 55 published. I'm forgetting now. And happy to say it's our bookshop, saptarishishshop.com, that has copies of this book. You know, very few bookshops keep it. And 15 years back, 16 years back, I don't remember now, it was 2003 or something, Gary. I was so enamored with Yogi Avyogi. And later I realized that many Westerners have, they use it regularly. Western Vedic astrologers use it regularly. I think that's due to Hard D4.
Yep, yep, exactly. Essentially, I became familiar with the technique because of a fairly well-known Western astrologer, Hart Defoe, and Hart Defoe had I guess learned the technique from his teacher, and Hart was a very serious Jyotish. He was one of the people who insisted his students read Sanskrit, you know, and because that was the way he learned. And I think one of the things about some of the techniques that Hart introduced is they're a little bit non-mainstream, but they're you know. So let's say, just to give an example, he takes a position that Rahu is exalted in Scorpio.
Okay.
And that's a really unique position. But he actually provides some research, and he said that this is what my guru told me,
Okay.
and that was how he justified it. But some of the other techniques he came up with, they were sort of precursors. I would say precursors, or they prefigured some of Sanjay Rath's explanations in some ways, because he actually gave an explanation of why certain planets, like in his compatibility book, why certain planets would produce certain results in relationships, and why certain and house to house relationships between charts. So he was a bit of a pioneer, because a lot of the astrology books that I first read were more based around if the person has, I use my favorite one because I have this configuration. If Saturn is in the 12th house, the native will be stupid. So I just so you read that in the book, you go like, hey, wait a minute, but it'll also catch your attention, but you'll just get left with that with no explanation. And I think one of the things that Hart, I won't say he pioneered, but he certainly brought attention to the fact that Jyotish, the aphorisms are good, and you should test out the aphorisms, but essentially you need to have a system. So you can't just string a bunch of aphorisms together and say, well, this aphorism says this and this aphorism says that without context. You need to have a larger framework to place it in, and that was also one of the benefits we got from reading people like Pandit Gopesh Osha and James Braha, even for that matter, because James did a great service to Westerners in that he actually put it within a framework. It wasn't a perfect framework, but James did an outstanding job in terms of that. David Frawley did somewhat similar work. So you had essentially a system. And when I was reading Parashara the first few times through, I was saying, oh, I can see where David Frawley gets this from, or I can see where James got this from. But if you read Parashara without these kinds of baby step guides, you'd be totally lost.
Yeah.
But the chapters, the things that really struck me in Parashara were essentially there is this larger framework that he gives you within the book. And there is a system for divination and a technique. But a lot of other books, Phaladipika gives it too. Phaladipika definitely gives it. But a lot of other books aren't quite as systematic as that. So some of the Nadi books are really, they're mind-bogglingly complex or complicated. And so that's not even the fault of the translator. It's just the way they're structured. And I think they assume a certain level of knowledge that the students are even exposed to. But at least within these systems, you can have a kind of a framework. And I think without a framework, I've seen so many Facebook dialogues lately in which the person says, I have such and such in this nakshatra or in this, or I have that. And I'll look, and I'm not criticizing them. I'm saying, what's the larger framework of your chart? How can you just analyze that from that one position? You can analyze a little bit, but unless you put it in a larger context, it's meaningless. It's like somebody saying, I have money. I have a capacity. I have money, but you have no context into how much money the person has, where they live, what kind of society they're in. So you just say this position will bring you money. How much? How little? It's just it's a piecemeal way of looking at a chart, and it's not wrong, but it's just piecemeal. So the framework is you need the outline before you can actually put the pieces in the jigsaw puzzle and see what they mean. And the Yogi Point, and the way I'm going to approach the Yogi Point is essentially as a framework, as opposed to the Yogi Point and the sign gives such and such.
Okay. Let me just, for the readers, let me say something about the author Sheshadri Iyer and his book, because many people, like my habit, thanks due to my mentor, he has huge history of each and every author, huge experiences with authors, with village astrologers. So Sheshadri Iyer was a giant of an astrologer, senior to B.V. Raman, if I remember well, pretty senior. And he was very strict, egoistical, etc. Very, very strong-willed person. And B.V. Raman did help him write some articles in Dr. Raman's magazine. Biggest contribution, what people, the young ones are not aware of Sheshadri Iyer, was yes, definitely Yogi Avyogi and all that. He created something called digital nomads. Then was introducing various vargas, especially D11, all that kind of vargas, D8, D11, which normal people don't use, you know. So these vargas, he gave this thing and Panchang and Dagda Rashi. The only problem is what was published in his book, the table, one or two tables. There is a slight variation of it. His very close student was Dasha Shetty. Dasha Shetty is still there in uh, Bangalore. I've been wanting to do a workshop with him for the last 10 years. It's not been happening. So he has that slight variations in the tables for Dagda Rashi and this, which he says that before Sheshadri Iyer, before dying, he said that these were printing mistakes in his book. So I
Yeah.
do not know which ones exactly, but Dagda Rashi, recently I heard, yes. So I'll tell a story of a great Bhigu astrologer, which K.N. Rao himself has written in his book, was the late K.C. Saxena. The story I've said so many times, it's like repeating. K.N. Rao wrote that only three astrologers in Delhi impressed him, and one of them was K.C. Saxena. And I've been so unlucky. I have this great astrologer whom K.N. Rao has given great, and if I tell you his predictions are brilliant, brilliant. I mean, he would look at a chart and say, you know, right now your wife is learning a classical musical instrument from her teacher.
Mhm.
And the man looked at his watch and said, yes, this is the time the teacher comes to my home. And then he said, in 2 months, your wife will run away with this teacher. So the man says, will she come back? He says, this is my card. When she runs away, you come and you tell me. Now, this was the legend called K.C. Saxena.
Yeah.
K.C. Saxena, incidentally, he had some Brigu notes which were in short form, he used glyphs in his handwriting. Mentor had it, mentor passed it on to me. Unfortunately, during my shifting, I do not know where it was. It was of no use to me because I do not understand glyphs and very small writings.
Yep.
But this much big handwritten notes. I just remembered it right now because I was discussing about it a month back uh, with a friend who said he will come to my go down, search for it, etc. and all that. But anyway, when K.C. Saxena died all of a sudden, his wife, this is the story told to me by G.K. Goel, the late G.K. Goel, who's written commentary on Brihad Jataka, published by Sagar Publications. He was a very senior astrologer. His wife shouted at all the astrologers and said, none of you could predict. Did you not know that he's going to die? So G.K. Goel said, I think I remember something. Opened the door of wardrobe, searched through some papers, and found the paper he was searching for, which was of prediction given by Sheshadri Iyer for K.C. Saxena, the Brigu astrologer.
Yeah.
There in that prediction, it was written, Jupiter will not cross your fourth house. Jupiter will not cross your fourth house. And at that time, Jupiter was in the fourth house when he died, something like that.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. And he had written this and signed and then stamped on it. So K.C. Saxena was always scared and used to tell G.K. Goel, the great legendary astrologer Sheshadri Iyer has written this. So then I'm going to die.
Oh.
But anyway, that's a story. I must also say, someone recently told me that Sheshadri year, every astrologer has his good predictions and bad predictions. People like to create images only about the good predictions. You know, Sheshadri did fail, I think, once or twice in BV Raman's chart.
Yeah.
You know, so it happens. Anyway, let's come to our study today of Yogi Avyogi. The ball is
Sure.
in your court.
Of course. Okay. And all right. So let me see if I can share the screen, and we'll get it up and rolling. All right. All right. So the calculation of the Yogi point is really where we're going to start. You know, it's really actually it's a relatively straightforward calculation. So and for any people who've studied Western astrology charts or Tajika astrology, you'll see it has a lot in common with the points that are calculated in the Arabic parts, or even in the Tajika parts for the annual chart, for the Varshapal chart. So essentially, to calculate the Yogi point, you just add the longitudes of the sun plus the moon starting at 0 degrees Aries. And to that total, you add 3 signs in 3 degrees and 20 minutes to that. Okay, so 93 degrees, 20 minutes. And essentially, that's 10 nakshatras, basically. You're adding to the sign. If you get a number that is higher than 360, subtract 360 from your total. And once you have a total that's less than 360 degrees, add how many 30-degree signs it takes to reach your own sign. Whatever nakshatra sits in that part of the zodiac, the ruler of the Vimshottari Dasha nakshatra is a Yogi planet.
Okay.
So essentially, you just take the sun and the moon, add the 93 degrees, and you will also have to make an account for your own sign as part of the calculation. And essentially, these points are relatively easy. Most softwares calculate these for you. You don't have to know the mechanics in order to work with it. But it's just good to know this. Okay. And let me see if I can go on to the next screen. And the duplicate Yogi Graha is the simplest calculation of all. You know, so essentially, let's say, I'll just use my own chart as an example. My Yogi point sits in Anuradha nakshatra. Anuradha is in Scorpio, and the lord of the constellation in which the nakshatra sits is Mars. We're not using the K2 Mars alternate rulership. So, and at least the way the software that I have calculates out that Mars is my duplicate Yogi planet. And I can tell you from personal experience, I haven't yet hit my Mars major planetary period. I'm not going to hit it until my 90s. And since that's my second and seventh lord, I'll probably be dead fairly early into it. But Mars sub-periods tend to be really good for me in terms of both, even though it's a malefic, even though it's a death-inflicting house in my chart. And I'll explain a little bit more about what Mars does in the chart as well as a duplicate Yogi planet. Saturn was my best Mahadasha by far, even though Saturn's in my 12th house. So Saturn's Anuradha's lord. Even though Saturn's in my 12th house, it was by far my best Mahadasha for money. You know, it was when I had a lot of money in the bank. And I could go out and, pretty much buy whatever the heck I wanted to buy. Within a reason. I couldn't go out and buy $1 million, but if I wanted to buy something I saw in a store, that was no problem. I can't do that now. So, but basically, Saturn was an excellent planet in terms of financial success. To get the Avyogi lord, you do the same. Instead of adding 93 degrees 20 minutes, you add 186 degrees, 40 minutes. And alternatively, as a really simple, more straightforward approach to doing it, you can do the same thing and just count 6 nakshatra lords away in the Vimshottari Dasha system. That lord is the Avyogi lord. Okay, so it's a little simpler. So let's say if K2 is the Yogi planet, then counting forward K2, Venus, Sun, Moon, Mars, Rahu. Rahu would be the Avyogi Graha. Okay, so calculating, the really complicated part is calculating the Yogi planet, but again, it's really not extraordinarily complicated. It's math. It's addition. It's addition and subtraction.
Correct. Sounds good.
Okay, so the function of the Yogi planet, and I think it's interesting because I didn't read his book. You know, it's plenty of truth there. But I'm saying to myself, well, the 10th house, the 10th nakshatra would make sense in terms. I think it's one of the prosperity nakshatras. And also, if yeah, so it essentially functions as the first nakshatra again. So the first nakshatra is essentially a prosperous nakshatra. And if you think about the logic behind it, it's like a beginning of new wealth. So you can sort of accept that as the reason for that being the starting point. But the Yogi planet itself is said to be judged in the Mahadasha of the Yogi planet, or the Mahadasha of the Avyogi planet. But I have seen results given when auspicious or inauspicious planets have passed over it too. So transits Gochara points are kind of important. Gocharas don't produce lasting effects, but the dashas will. You know, so you enter the dasha. So if you're in a dasha of a Yogi planet, essentially it may take you a while to muster money, but once you have it, you'll have it for a significant period of time. But there are things that can break it or bust it. It is auspicious for financial success if it sits well placed by sign, house, and aspect. So it's the same basic rules as you would have for a regular planet in a chart. And it will give some struggle, but if well placed by house and sign but badly aspected. So let's say Saturn has an aspect or Jupiter has an aspect of Mars. It'll still give some good results. You know, essentially it's the same as we were saying the other day, or last week when we were talking about wealth-producing planets. The amount of success, certain charts won't produce wealth. I'm not saying that every chart has a potential to produce wealth, but certain charts, it depends on how much the person is willing to focus and sacrifice in terms of the charts. Some charts are easy charts. Some charts can be too easy charts. I think of Jim Morrison's chart, and he had all Deva planets. These planets were all in Deva nakshatras. It made it very easy for him to succeed, and it made it very easy for him to get addicted to drugs. You know, it was just, so you had a combination of although the chart was a tough chart, it gave great success. It gave a lift to the chart by being in Deva nakshatras, but it was destructive for certain combinations. But, and it's the same with Nishabanga Raj Yoga. Nishabanga gives rise after some difficulty, right? All right, it will give some struggle, but it will place by house and sign, but badly aspected. If it will give great struggle, then badly placed by house or sign and badly aspected. And that was my Saturn. My Saturn took me actually up until Saturn Mars separated to really produce like financial comfort or security. Okay, so that was a point in which the Saturn Mars Mahadasha worked very well. And like I said, I'm not Bill Gates. I wasn't anywhere near wealthy. But I had a lot of savings. It will give wealth later in life based upon its placement in the Navamsha chart. So as you go through the harmonic charts, you'll see certain combinations in which the Yogi Planet will actually give good results. It can also form yogas with other planets to increase or decrease wealth. So if it combines with the Lord of the second house, or it's in the second house, or it's in the 11th house, or in the 5th, or in the 9th, it'll give better results. Again, the same principle. So you're treating this like another planet, another Dhyana yoga producing planet. Okay? Or the Yogi Point itself. The Yogi Point will produce, and like I said, I was taking particular note of it over the past couple of years, because about 3 years ago, let's just give a personal example. I was getting ready to retire, and within about 2 months of retiring, I won a piece of musical equipment, like a $3,000 piece of musical equipment, in a drawing. So my name was just selected. I just won it. I never won anything like that before in my entire life. And the Yogi Planet was involved, and it was passing over, and it was a good transit. The major planetary period itself wasn't anything extraordinary. I was in a Venus Sun subperiod. My Sun's kind of, it's not that well placed for finances, but in terms of luck, I just managed to get this little prize. And it can also form yogas with other planets, and one can read wealth in a chart using these planets and points as lagnas as well. So if you can use the same way as you can use a Sri Lagna as an alternate Lagna, or an Aruda Lagna as an alternate Lagna, you can use these as alternate Lagnas too. But mainly in terms of fortune. Let me see if I can get this to move. And somebody was asking me, a client of mine was asking me, can these be used to measure other things in life? And I've never really seen the Yogi Planet really. I've seen it, in my case, give some career success, but that's kind of where it's placed in my chart. It's in the 10th from the 10th Lord. So it wouldn't necessarily produce the same results in other people's charts, but it will produce some financial gains. Excuse me. Okay, so the Yogi Planet, so let's move on to this. I don't want to ramble too much. The Yogi Planet can also determine the kind of wealth a person will have based upon the attributes of the Yogi Planet. Okay. The duplicate Yogi Planet will give wealth similarly to the Yogi Planet, will be less strong. It won't be quite as potent. It's more generalized. And look to the dasha of the Yogi and duplicate Yogi Planet for increased wealth. Also look to the dasha of planet located in the nakshatras of the Yogi and Avyogi planets. So again, for personal reference, I was in my Avyogi planet is the moon, and it's placed in the 5th house, which is not supposed to be too good, to be honest. It's one of the, so if the Avyogi, sort of like a Viprit Raj Yogi, if the Avyogi is placed in the 68th or the 12th, it gives relatively better results. If it's placed in an auspicious house, it tends to spoil the person's luck.
But could you repeat that? The Avyogi in good houses
well,
not give
if the Avyogi is placed in the 68th or the 12th houses, it acts a bit like a Viprit Raj Yoga.
Okay.
Okay. So so a lot of these things, you'll see certain combinations, you'll be able to form analogs to standard, to basic yogas, and so like basic fundamental yogas in Vedic astrology, such as Viprit Raj Yoga. So if the Yogi Planet, my Yogi Planet was located in the 12th house, so it certainly gave some struggle. My Avyogi Planet is placed in the 5th house, so I don't have children, but also my Avyogi periods are not bad for career. Career is my 10th lord. So actually, my career activity goes up. Just my income doesn't go up proportionally. So I become more busy, but I have to wait for money to come. And so I've been very busy this past year. I just haven't been making as much money as I did a couple of years ago. And I'm not complaining. I'm retired, so I'm not going to be making as much money as I did a couple of years ago. I'm retired from state service. But I also got called back to work right at the beginning of my moon subperiod. So they called me back and said, "Hey, you want to come back and work for us part-time?" But I wasn't getting the pay I did before. So it's almost like a classic example of how an Avyogi planet works. And I was telling somebody at work, she was saying, "Oh, how does it feel to be retired?" I said, "It's great that I can sleep in the morning, but I'm busier now than when I was working full time." And she looked at me and I said, "It's true." So the Avyogi period will produce a lot more activity, but you won't get quite the same financial reward. It's not going to be deleterious to your career. It just won't necessarily bring the financial compensation you would expect. So that's sort of been the history of my life. I've been engaged in these very long periods where I've been working like ridiculous hours, and it takes a while for my pay to reach the level that it should, based upon the hours I've been working. Which is neither here nor there. I'm not complaining about it. It's just sort of like what I've gotten used to. So essentially, if you look at the nakshatra, so not to deviate too much, when I entered Mercury, so I came from Saturn into Mercury. That's the normal Vimshottari Mahadasha sequence. Saturn was in a nakshatra ruled by Mars, so it was in Chitra nakshatra, so it sort of had a double effect. My Mercury's in my 12th house. I have Mercury in Virgo in my chart. And my Mercury happened to be in Hasta nakshatra, which is ruled by the moon. So I ended up changing jobs, taking a cut in pay. It took me about a year and a half to get up to the level of pay I was in. And also during Mercury Mahadasha, for the first time in my life, I got laid off.
Oh.
So essentially, and I ended up working at a much more responsible job for about the same level of pay that I left a previous job at. So it's just Mercury Mahadasha was, now the way Mercury is placed in my chart, it's not well placed. It's placed between Sun and Saturn anyway, so it's not really that well placed, even though its dignity is strong. But also, I was looking and saying, "Oh, moon, it's a moon nakshatra," so that makes sense. And every time I've looked at this kind of phenomenon, there'll be a slight decline in income or a slight decline in fortune if the operant Mahadasha Lord is in the Avyogi and Avyogi ruled Mahadasha. The Avyogi planet will typically give obstructions to wealth, but it will not necessarily adversely affect other areas of life ruled by that planet. And again, this is what I said before, it produces a repeat Raj Yoga effect if it's in a Dusthana house, like in a 68th or the 12th house. And all right, so as in the case of Yogi Planet, check the nakshatra lord of current dasha to see if the Avyogi lord rules that space. This period will produce monetary challenges. Let's see if I can move forward. The mixing of the Avyogi and the Yogi. Now, it is possible that you'll see the Avyogi and the Yogi planets together in a chart. So it's possible the Yogi and the Avyogi planets will be conjunct, will be aspecting each other. So my Yogi my duplicate Yogi Planet aspects the moon, so I never suffer that much during moon subperiods.
Okay.
But it's a little bit more of a struggle. I have to wait a little bit to get money in. And so this can function a little bit like a Nichabanga Raj Yoga, okay? And I have seen the charts of other people who I know who are clients or students of mine, and I know one astrologer I know has both the Yogi and the Avyogi planet in the second house. So this person is relatively well known. She's on television, but she also has ups and downs in money.
Okay.
And this will produce a dasha period of sudden increases and decreases of income depending on the operant dasha. The ultimate outcome will rely on the nature of the planets and which planet has more strength in the chart, and I think primarily in Vimshapak. Shadbala's system is good, but for the Yogi and Avyogi planet, I think Vimshapak is more accurate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying to give more weightage to Vimshapak-Bala.
Yeah.
Yogi Avyogi.
And again, it's. I actually had software. I got used to using Vimshapak as opposed to Shadbala because when I first started out, I got software that didn't calculate Shadbala, oddly enough. And the Vimshapaks actually produce a lot of useful information. The Vimshapak strings that they produce, and sometimes they will disagree with the Shadbala string. And I found it more useful I found the Shadbala just to draw a line in the sand. I have found the Shadbala useful for indicating how the planet functions at a personality level, or let's say in terms of the living persons that are ruled by the planet. So my sun is weak in Shadbala. It's a little bit stronger in Vimshapak. So my father died fairly early, not really young, but fairly early. He died when he was in my 30s. And the Shadbala, my son's Shadbala is weak. And Vimshapak is relatively strong. So career-wise, in terms of being able to spring back from things, I'm okay. But it will tend to, so the Vimshapak will tend to be a little bit more solid. It'll go into certain areas of life a little bit more consistently than Shadbala, because Shadbala, as you know, has a whole bunch of different elements combined into it, including some of the Varga charts. So it's more like a mix and match. If you're looking for certain things, I'm not sure my interpretation is correct, but if you're looking for certain things, like if you're looking for national strength of a planet, like whether or not you can use the sun as an ascendant or something like that, you would look at the Shadbala. If you want to figure out how certain houses will function, I tend to look more at the Vimshapak, or whether or not the person's going to have enough confidence to pursue certain goals. I'll look at the sun. I'll look at the sun and Vimshapak more so than the Shadbala.
Mm-hmm.
It is possible to have the duplicate and the Avyogi planet be the same, and I'm going to show you a chart where that happens.
Okay.
And that's actually supports wealth, because essentially what happens is the Avyogi tends to get swallowed up. It really can't function that strongly in the chart.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go ahead to some charts now, if I can. Okay. All right, great. Okay, so Mr. Gates has his Yogi Point is over here in Capricorn. Okay, so the Yogi Point is, and I managed to kill the Yogi Point. Let me just get that up again. I managed to block that out. Let's see what the Yogi Point is. Okay, so the Panchang and Yogi Point is in the lower left-hand side of the screen.
Hmm.
And his Yogi Point, Yogi Lord is the Sun. The Avyogi planet is Saturn. And the duplicate Yogi planet is Saturn.
Okay.
So this is an interesting chart. This is one of the charts. This is sort of why I want to show this chart. Mr. Gates has, now again, you could make an argument for the Gemini rising based upon this because the Yogi Point isn't going to change if he's Gemini rising or not. Not really.
Yeah.
Because the moon isn't really going to change all that much. The sun isn't going to change all that much. It will probably be in the same spot. But it's in Capricorn. Now, the Yogi planet is this debilitated sun, right? So again, this is sort of, and it's in the fourth house, so it gives a rise in status in the chart. Saturn is both the Avyogi planet and the duplicate Yogi planet. So it's also conjunct with the Aruda of the ninth house, but I don't trust the way these Arudas are calculated in the software, to be honest with you. I have to get an updated version of the software. So it's nothing against the software. It's just a little fluky. And essentially, you have an exalted planet ruling as the duplicate yogi, causing a Nietzsche Banga of the sun. Okay? So that will give some initial struggles. He did struggle educationally. We know that. You know, he didn't struggle. He left school basically. He left Harvard fairly early on. And I think in this chart, one of the interesting things of this chart is he has sun is in Swati Nakshatra, right? Okay, so the sun goes over here, sun's in Swati. Now, Swati is a wealth-producing nakshatra, okay? It's one of the wealth-producing nakshatras. His Yogi Point is way down here at 07 degrees of Capricorn, which I believe is Uttarashad Nakshatra, if I recall correctly, which again is another wealth-producing nakshatra. So the Yogi Point is well placed for him. If we look back at his chart, let's just go back a few years. Let's go back to 0, and I'll keep these Mahadashas pretty. So he was born in a Saturn Mahadasha. So his family was fairly wealthy. You know, his family he didn't come from a poor background at all. His father was a lawyer. As a matter of fact, a relatively successful lawyer. And around 1982, so he left school during K2 Mahadasha, it looks like. Around 1982, he entered the Venus Mahadasha for 20 years. And one of the fascinating things about Gates' chart is that right around the time he started to show phenomenal wealth was right around the same time he was being investigated. Okay, so he was showing phenomenal rise of wealth. Let's just raise it. I don't want to. So essentially, everybody was hearing about him. He's in this Mahadasha of. I'm going to put it down here. He's in this Mahadasha of Venus, which essentially is. I remember K. and Rao saying this specifically, that Venus ruled computers. And there are a couple of reasons you can get into that. And I remember one of my fellow astrologers, who's a very good astrologer, said, well, maybe it's because it's a luxury item. And I said, no, it's because Venus rules mathematics. Venus is one of the mathematics planets. If you look at physicists, economists, people who deal with numbers, Venus actually is much more prominently placed in their charts than, let's say, a planet like Mercury is. And it's not because Venus is necessarily this. So the idea that Venus is just responsible for luxury or for arts. Anybody who's painted, anybody who's ever worked on a musical instrument, and I have, music is incredibly mathematical. You know, art is incredibly mathematical. Almost any of the aesthetic disciplines are mathematical. So Venus essentially has some governance over those. So he'll get some money from computers during this period, 1982 to 2002. And his real wealth starts to stoke up. So he starts to get investigated by the federal government. This is the Sun Mahadasha. The Sun. So he'll have some difficulties at the same time as he's amassing this enormous wealth. And he'll have some difficulties from, what does the Sun stand for? It stands for government. It doesn't necessarily stand for the follower in his chart, it stands for government. So he'll have a rise in power or fame during the Sun Mahadasha, right at the time he's being investigated for anti-monopoly or unfair trading. So at least in terms of the Yogi planet producing wealth, it definitely did that. Venus made it fairly easy for him. Venus is in Vishaka Nakshatra, and Saturn's in it, but it's right next to Saturn. It's right next to the Avyogi planet. So what does the Avyogi planet do? Well, it's in conjunction with Venus, which gives him field of computers. It forms a nice little kind of a Raj Yoga in his chart. And it also forms a union with the second house lord, forming a nice little Dana Yoga in his chart. So Venus forms a Dana Yoga with the Sun, and 11th lord with the second lord, and Saturn just essentially makes him stubborn enough to follow through with it. But basically, if you look at the chart, that Venus Mahadasha was when he was acquiring all these things backed up by Saturn and backed up by the Sun, but the payoff wasn't without consequences. So the Avyogi planet did function as a duplicate Yogi planet. And the Avyogi planet, you can think of it in these terms. The Avyogi planet is almost like the competition. Okay, so he has a lot of competition going on, but he doesn't have, because Venus is so powerfully placed in that particular sign, it's not going to cause him a lot of problems. The competition is really not going to cause him a lot of problems. It'll cost his reputation to a certain extent. And right now he's in Mars Mahadasha, and Mars is in the third house, along with an exalted Mercury. So his public image, he's got a very political public image right now. As a matter of fact, his board is involved in education. The Gates Foundation gives awards out to educators. It gives awards out to, and it's been doing that ever since the Moon Mahadasha, actually. But the Moon Mahadasha is in the 9th house. It really doesn't have anything to do with wealth or accumulation of wealth. But his Sun Mahadasha would have actually elevated him to essentially to the highest level. The Moon Mahadasha was just icing on the cake. It really wasn't. It wasn't significant in the rise. It just kept it coming. So essentially, although he had all these quote unquote, if you were to look at this chart and you say, "Oh, the Sun's debilitated. This guy is not going to have a lot of confidence." Well, actually, he's going to have. It's been my experience with people with debilitated planets tend to overcompensate for that part of their life. So actually, people with a debilitated Sun can come across as being like basically very aggressively pushy.
Okay.
And like I said, it's not something that they're necessarily even conscious of. but I've known people personally that have debilitated suns, and they're extraordinarily argumentative. They're extraordinarily ambitious. They're extraordinarily forceful in the way they take on opponents. And it's almost like they have an exalted sun, especially if the Nietzsche bond is in effect. So let's go to another chart we looked at the other day, and that was Jeff Bezos. And I realized I was mispronouncing his name, but so Jeff's chart is a little bit more. It's a little bit less oddball than Bill's is. Let me just get this. All right. So this is the founder of Amazon, the richest man in the world. And this is interesting, if only because you can see the way the Avyogi is working in the chart. But it's very indirect. So his 164, his Yogi Planet is down here. Sorry, it's so far down the corner. His Yogi Planet is Ketu. You can just barely see it, Sunil.
Yeah.
Okay. His Avyogi planet is Rahu. His duplicate Yogi planet is Jupiter. All right. So essentially, Ketu's in this kind of a grand conjunction is in an angle with the Lord of a trine. Special Parashara combination, right? My favorite Parashara combination, because a lot of people don't look at it. they'll just go, oh, Ketu or Rahu, no, and I'll just panic from it, and I'll just say, oh my God, this person's going to have a horrible life. They're going to be crazy, or you have a Ketu moon conjunction. This person's going to be crazy, or they're going to have a lot of bad luck. And Ketu's with the sun, looks like they're wandering in an eclipse. Oh no. And they'll just go like, and they haven't read, and not making fun, but they haven't read Parashara, because they don't realize that's a special Raj Yoga. Or they just panic at the surface. It's really interesting. And I'm not criticizing my fellow astrologers. It's just a lot of, but especially a lot of novices will look at that and say, "Oh my God, that's horrible. That poor man has no career." And actually, it's interesting because he did lose money the first few years with Amazon was in operation. Ketu's also in. It's not in Mula, it's in Purvashada Nakshatra, but his moon is in Mula Nakshatra. Okay, and Mula is it's a phenomenal wealth-producing nakshatra. It's not, it's even better than Gates is, to be honest. But if you look, so he's rendering a Ketu Mahadasha, so he's not going to experience, so let's look at his duplicate Yogi. So Jupiter's so really his big wealth hasn't come yet. It looks like that'll be in the 60s, 66 or so. But let's see where the Mahadasha lords are. So in 1968 to 1980, he was in a Venus Mahadasha. Venus is in Dhanishta, which is another wealth-producing Mahadasha. But so this guy has a lot of wealth-producing Mahadashas working for him. But I don't know what he was doing during his Venus Mahadasha, so I can't talk about that. 1988, he was in his Sun Mahadasha. Sun is in Uttarashad. Again, not bad for financial success. Moon is in, and I believe he started Amazon in his Moon Mahadasha, if I recall correctly. Because I can remember seeing it. I was a big book and record person, and I said, "Oh my God, all these CDs by all these weird groups that I like, they're available from this guy. This is great." And all these weird books I can't get a hold of anywhere else, they're all available. And So Moon was his Gnati Karaka. So that's really like a kind of a weird combination. But again, we have this competitive nature. Okay, so Ketu's in a Mahadasha that's essentially, it's in an angle from Jupiter. Jupiter's in, excuse me, Jupiter's in Revati Nakshatra, which is a good nakshatra. And Moon is in Mula Nakshatra. So that'll make him incredibly. One of the things about Mula Nakshatra is if a person's willing to take risks. That's really the big thing. If they're willing to risk everything, Mula will essentially return everything to them. So that doesn't mean that everybody who has. So I have no planets in Mula. I have a planet that's close to it. I have my Mars is in Jyesha. It's like almost in Mula. But basically, this guy is willing to give everything up. Okay, so essentially he was rolling the dice, and like I said, he wasn't making money really until about 2004, or at least until 2000. God, I think it was around. I don't know the exact dates, but it was certainly not until it was in his Mars Mahadasha, maybe not even until it was in his Rahu Mahadasha. Now, the interesting thing about this is Rahu's his Avyogi planet, so he's making a lot of money. What happened to him over the past year? He got divorced. His wife became, I think, the richest woman in the world, but just by divorcing him. Okay? So he had a couple of things happening. He has that Gemini Sagittarius axis. So he lost a lot of money. His Yogi Point was attacked by Saturn. It was attacked by Ketu over the past 6 months. So he lost. Now that doesn't mean he's poor and he's destitute and he's on the street. All these previous Mahadashas, this Moon Mahadasha showed a willingness to take great risks. Mars is in Capricorn in this chart. So if you read this particular chart with the Yogi Point as the ascendant, let's put it this way, with the Yogi Point as the ascendant, Mars and Saturn, this forms a great conjunction in the chart. It'll give a willingness to sacrifice. It'll give a willingness, Mars and Saturn together give a lot of attention to detail, a lot of attention. So he'll get everything perfect. He'll be willing to take risks. So essentially, whenever you have a combination like that, so he has an exalted planet and a planet in his own sign in the second house. He has Jupiter in the fourth house from his Yogi planet. He has Venus in the third. Venus in the third isn't too spectacular, but it's well placed in Dhanishta. And he made his initial occupation from books. That was how Amazon started. So essentially, that Mercury, so it's communication, it's over media. So you could argue, well, Bill Gates is in communication. Not really. Bill Gates was software development. It's a slightly different field. Amazon is selling. Amazon is a selling mechanism. That's more of a Mercury function. And he'll sell hard to, he'll sell hard to find things. But I think one of the interesting things about this chart is, well, we can look at the way the Avyogi, or essentially not the Avyogi, but the way that transits to the Yogi Point hit him last year during a Rahu Mahadasha, during a Rahu Mercury subperiod. Really is Rahu Saturn or Rahu Mercury when the divorce went through. And Rahu Saturn was probably what triggered it. But basically, he has at least in his chart, the Yogi Point will tend to be a little bit afflicted when he hits terms like this, even when Saturn. So is it going to take him? Is it going to make him a poor man? No. He's still an extraordinarily rich man. But will it hit him financially? Yeah. It'll take away some money that he'll have less money in his account than he previously had. His wife will become fabulously rich, and that's the Mercury too. The Mercury being afflicted. Essentially, this particular Saturn transit from 2017 will essentially wreck his marriage. Okay, and as I understand it, they didn't part on. It was a mutually agreeable separation. They didn't hate each other, but they just grew apart. And I think in charts like this, his chart's kind of tough for marriage or relationship anyway. If we go over to the Navamsha and look at where the Yogi Point is, see if we can find it. I can find it somewhere. Maybe it's not in there. Huh, that's funny. Maybe I didn't program it. In the Navamsha, it's in Taurus. Okay? So again, Saturn was in the sign between 2015 and 2017. Probably started building up to the breakup of the marriage. But again, I don't want to make it too speculative. But in this chart, Saturn in the Navamsha, Saturn would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, aspecting his first house, aspecting Mars. And if we want to build one more element into it, Saturn was also aspecting his Dharaka planet Venus. So essentially, the relationship, he'll lose money during this Mahadasha. He's in a Sade Sati too. I didn't say that before, but it's pretty obvious he's in a 7.5 year period of Saturn. But again, Sade Satis don't necessarily destroy people, and that's another important point that that astrologers have to remember. They give more responsibility, they give more burdens, but they don't destroy. There is some discussion I've seen online about Amazon not being a viable long-term business model. And so it could actually face some problems during the rest of the Rahu Mahadasha, but I doubt this man will ever be poor. The business model may not last. Like Netflix is in incredible trouble. Companies like Netflix are in incredible trouble right now. So let's go ahead to one more chart. And this one, I think I did get the right birth information. If I can find it. Oh yeah, there she is. Oh, and it still didn't save. All right, so I'm not going to use that one. And I pulled up the right information on her earlier today, and it still didn't save it. So let's go down here. And let's pull up somebody I haven't looked at that strongly. Well, let's look at Ted Turner. He's a pretty rich guy.
Who, sorry?
Ted Turner, he found the CNN.
CNN.
Okay, so he's a fairly, and I haven't looked at this chart for Yogi Point, but his Yogi Point is in Leo, again in a really good nakshatra for wealth. This would be in Purva Falguni nakshatra. And his Oh no, it's in Maga. My apologies. It's in Maga Nakshatra, but it's still a good wealth nakshatra. Avyogi planet is Rahu, duplicate Yogi is the sun. So Ketu is his lord. Is the lord of the nakshatra. So it looks like in this chart. So in the 1970s, between 1973 and 1982, he was in a Saturn Mahadasha. Saturn is in his fifth house. No aspect on the Yogi point, but the Yogi point and the duplicate Yogi, but Saturn is in Revati Nakshatra. And there's a K2 influence there. It's really, really indirect, but there's a K2 influence there. It's in his second level pada is K2. But also in this chart, so this isn't quite as direct, but he did tend to get a lot of success. 1979 subperiod of K2 was essentially when cable started exploding around the world. 1979 to roughly 1980. That was when it started exploding, and I think that was when he founded the network. And the entire Mahadasha, so around 2009, I think he sold off everything, if I recall correctly. That was his K2 Mahadasha. So he still has a lot of money. I'm not sure if he's still involved in CNN or not. But I think if you're looking at a Mahadasha like this, and if you have his duplicate Yogi as a sun, and his sun's in Scorpio, so K2, 1983 to 1984 was when CNN became like a really huge household word. So it was during the subperiod of Saturn, not during the Mahadasha of the Yogi planet, but during this subperiod. And these two subperiods, 1979 all the way up until 1983, essentially fixed him in terms of financial success. In terms of his Avyogi operating Rahu, he really had an operational Rahu subperiod. Mercury Rahu, he did have probably a little bit of a problem, but I can't recall. I think he divested some assets in 2002 to 2004. But this chart is just, so the Yogi planet won't function alone, but it'll tend to show the opportunities for wealth or the opportunities for increases in wealth. So let's say if the chart has like a really strong Yogi point, so I don't think I'm ever going to be Ted Turner level or even, oh gosh, even the local stockbroker down the street level income. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Number one, I have Saturn aspecting my Yogi planet, which should be good, but it disposes to Mercury ruled. The duplicate Yogi disposes to the moon, and so there are all these loops that will essentially pull the money out. These guys have loops to pull the money in, and will keep it there. So essentially, this is a fairly, now he'll spend a lot of money because of that Rahu Moon conjunction, and a lot of it gets spent on women. I mean, I think he's had, if I recall correctly, I think he's had like 5 marriages or something like that. The most famous one being to Jane Fonda, but he had quite a few. But he also has this nice benefic combination. It's the Lord of the 7th and the Lord of the 11th and the Lord of the 10th in the first house. It's a nice combination for finances. Mars, the first Lord, is in the 11th house, so he has all these reinforcing patterns in the chart. So the Yogi planet won't function alone. And if you look at the Yogi planet, Turner's first assets were essentially land, or he bought up a lot of television stations basically, but he also bought up a lot of land in Georgia. That was where his first money came from. So the second house will show that at Mars with a strong Mercury influence over here. And Jeff Bezos, I think his family came from real estate too. I don't think he just automatically dropped everything and went to Amazon. So this is sort of a functional way the Yogi planets will work. If we look in this Navamsha, again, I have to look down here to see the Yogi planet. If I can find it. Where the heck is it? Where's this guy's Yogi planet? Let me see. Yogi Point should be showing. And that's really annoying. The software isn't cooperating. But there's the Yogi Point over here in the 8th house again with Mars. So there's certainly a strong property feature to his, even though Mars is debilitated. There's this weird exchange of lords between this. So this is 8th house, 12th house, 2 debilitated planets, almost a double of a free Raj yoga. It's really, it's a really weird combination in the chart. So he'll spend money, he'll lose money on real estate, but he'll gain it back. He'll lose it, he'll gain it back. And if I recall, that was really how he started. He had sort of a real estate empire, and then he turned it into TV stations that he sold. And so essentially he made money through speculation on land and property and radio and television. But I think one of the things, and also he was very innovative. So he was also one of the people like Bezos who essentially lost money before he made it, if I recall correctly. So this willingness to try new things, that will cost him money, but it will also bring him money in the long run. But the Yogi planet, essentially, this is a great confidence booster, and there's a strong identification of the Yogi point with all these wealth-producing combinations in the chart. The first Lord, the 10th Lord, the 11th Lord, and as a matter of fact, it's exchange of the 11th Lord and the first Lord. So he has all these things that essentially boost up his ability to keep and retain money. But the Yogi point becomes significant because he was actually known as being a millionaire. That was what he was a broadcast magnate, but he was essentially known for being a millionaire, and he was known for being an extraordinarily aggressive businessman. So none of these guys are. You can't look at their lives and say people like individuals like this, especially this is a high public profile individual. I haven't looked at George Soros' chart yet, to be honest with you, and I probably should, if only because I'd love to see where all the conspiracy theories come from about him. But And I'm not saying they're wrong. I just I just love to look at charts that have conspiracy. Well, there's even a conspiracy theory connected with Turner. Okay, it's not as big as the one connected with Soros, but essentially, CNN was called the Clinton News Network in the 1990s. So there was a feeling that he was working to promote Bill Clinton's agenda.
Okay.
So essentially you have all these, and you could probably see similar things in Rupert Murdoch's chart or in George Soros's chart, and so essentially the Rahu will give some kind of scandal or some kind of hidden detail or some kind of alleged hidden detail, whether it's real or not, nobody knows because it's Rahu, and it just sort of fogs up things. But essentially, these charts are all fairly dynamic charts. They're all really, really good for money.
Yes.
And you have an exchange of the fourth and the fifth lords. You have all these nice these compounding effects in the chart. Jupiter aspects the Yogi Point. How can he lose? So essentially, he does have a lot of support from his chart, no question. And as a matter of fact, it looks a little bit better than Bezos' chart, but Bezos has that unexpected Raj Yoga that like I said, that K2 combination is sort of a wild card. K2 can produce anything. It's really so it's a very creative. K2 is a very creative combination. Rahu is creative, but it's more aggressively greedy. So I don't know if these help a little bit in like explain the way the Yogi thing works.
Definitely. Thanks a lot for sharing several insights, especially the transits of planets on the Yogi Point, which happened in Jeff Bezos' chart.
Yeah. Now again, these are all fabulously wealthy people. So, I mean, if there could be, so I haven't looked at any charts where people have had like incredible levels of money in bankruptcies, and I'm not going to start looking those up right now, but that would be an interesting case study to look at. Essentially, just look at people who made like millions of dollars. Ted Nugent, the guy who became a talk show host, was actually started off as a rock musician, and he actually had a good sum of money, but it was stolen by his accountant. And now he's a syndicated talk show host, conservative syndicated talk show host.
Okay.
So you do have examples of people like that, people who essentially gain like relatively large amounts of money and been ripped off. Tony Braxton has the same problem, and it's not just musicians; these are just people I'm familiar with. Donald Trump had like extremes in his financial fortune. We could look at Trump just for 1 second. I don't want to. I want to see if I can find somebody who's a little bit. Trump's a good sample chart. I don't feel badly about going to him just quickly. So he had vast fluctuations. So his Yogi Point is, where is that? It's in the 10th house, along with Rahu, which makes a lot of sense. So the Yogi Point in the chart is 1 degree 15 minutes of Taurus. Yogi Lord is the sun, so it's Kritika Nakshatra. Avyogi is Saturn, and duplicate yogi is Venus. So his sun is very well placed in the chart.
Mhm.
It does have that Raj Yoga, the Sun Rahu. It has that Raj Yoga of a trinal lord with a node. However, his Avyogi chart, his Avyogi planet, is placed in the 12th house, which again is a fairly decent thing. His duplicate yogi planet, however, is also there. So that's going to make the ability to retain wealth less dynamic in his chart.
Mm.
So he has declared bankruptcy several times. And let's see if we can go back. So he started off life. He was born in Ketu Mahadasha. Venus Mahadasha he was fairly wealthy, but 1975 to 1981 was probably the period in which he started most. In 1981 to 1991 was the art of the deal and all that other stuff, where he became famous. But he was building up his real estate. Now, again, his father was in real estate before he was. He didn't enter that field on his own and build it up from nothing. His father actually, so that's the son in the chart. The father is the son. Father is the son. So he inherited that business, or he learned that business from his father. So that 1975 to 1981 ebb was there. The moon. Now, he became famous in the 1980s, which was kind of an interesting decade. You may remember it. I certainly remember it. Everybody wants to be rich in the 1980s. Okay, so the moon Ketu doesn't look all that bad. He got a full moon. He was known for making quote unquote deals, or and his reputation, to be honest with you, his reputation wasn't that great. He wasn't really, and it still kind of haunts him. He would essentially break deals, not pay people, things like that. But essentially, that moon, that debilitated moon, is a full moon, so he'll still have some success. It's an isolated moon, and largely, I think he has some of his first real estate failings during this decade, this 10 years. Okay, so he made some bad decisions. He had some of his first bankruptcies during these 10 years. Mars is the next Mahadasha. Mars is in the first house, forms a Raj Yoga. It's in the fourth from Yogi Point. And I think Mars, let's say Mars moon, some real estate problems. 1998, he enters his Rahu Mahadasha. Now, Rahu is going to bring a lot of fame or a lot of recognition, placed as it is in the chart. But again, because of this combination in the 12th house, he'll sustain certain assets, but he restructured debt several times. So it's not something that's unusual for people with vast fortunes to do. They'll file for bankruptcy. It looks horrible because it sounds like they've run out of money, but basically what it means is they've run out of enough money to cover their current expenses. So essentially, it's a way of restructuring debt.
Right.
So it sounds worse to a person on the street. Bankruptcy is shameful. We were brought up in an environment where you don't borrow more than you can to pay your bills, but we're talking about people who are essentially borrowing like vast amounts of money to pay vast expenses. And if they guess wrong about something, then they're going to end up not being able to cover their current expenses. So he didn't do anything that a lot of other businessmen don't do on a regular basis. It's just he's much more well known for it. But that's Saturn and Venus in the 12th house. Saturn in the 12th house can make a person stupid. I'll just go back to that. I mentioned that to you before we're on the line. So he'll have problems with his wives. That shows up, 7th house Lord. And also, and Saturn's also the indicator of problems with women in his chart because he has a Saturn-Venus conjunction. But that's not why he'll lose money. He'll lose money because he'll make some bad decisions here, or he'll bank on things that he thinks are going to do well that aren't. So it doesn't mean he's a horrible businessman. It means he's guessed badly in a very speculative market. But maybe he is a bad businessman. I don't know. I don't know. I don't have access to all of his dealings. But he has enough money to essentially buy his way out of it. But if you look at the Yogi Point up there, if it's in conjunction with Rahu, it'll give some problems. So K2 with the Yogi Point will give some problems. Rahu with the Yogi Point will give some problems. Mm-hmm. So it will give these, Rahu gives these sudden rises and sudden falls, right, in the chart. So he'll have that kind of yo-yo effect in his chart in terms of his wealth. Okay. So that's really not surprising. K2's a little bit less, more erratic, but we can look at Bezos and say, well, the model he picked sort of fit K2 better than the model that Trump picked fit Rahu because Bezos was dealing in abstracts more or less, although it was property, he was dealing in an abstract medium, and Trump was dealing in a fixed commodity medium. So housing is something fixed and it's real, or property. And if you look, his 10th house Lord goes to the 12th. So in some ways, he'll make money, he'll lose money, he'll make money, lose money, make money, lose money. And Saturn also aspects the 2nd house. I'll give expenses. So in some ways, I mean, I'm sure he's living comfortably. I'm sure he's not wanting for something. But this chart does indicate he has some challenges holding on to money, certainly. But the Yogi Point will always bail him out. So as soon as he loses, the sun will come back. If he loses to Venus, the sun will come back and put him in that happy place again. The sun's in Sirius and Mars Mahadasha, so he'll make money out of real estate. Venus is in Punarasu, Jupiter, Mahadasha. So again, Saturn and Venus is in Punarasu. So Jupiter's in Chitra. So again, he has a lot of real estate indicators, markers in his chart. Rahu's there. Mercury's there. I'm sorry. Chitra is definitely buildings. And Mrigashira is also real estate based because they're all Mars based. But Saturn will cost him. That Saturn aspect in Jupiter will cost him. So he'll make money, lose money, make money, lose money, make money, lose money. It's just sort of like this loop that he's kind of stuck in. All right. Yeah. So I don't know if that helped anymore, but I just wanted to give one more example of somebody who we know has lost money or who couldn't make his current bills.
Thank you so much, Gary, for sharing this knowledge over 3 charts with splendid explanations and detailed explanations.
Okay, I hope I didn't overstay my welcome.
No, not at all. And we hope to see you soon, probably on Upagrahas. Any one particular Upagraha you could take and just show 3-4 example charts or something like that.
Okay, my friend.
All
right. Thank you very much, Sunil. Always a pleasure. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you also. And good night. It must be quite late, 2 o'clock in the morning over there.
Yep, it is, but it's okay.
Thank you.
Right.